So I'll start things off, and then Cheryl will say a few things about the project that we've initiated. One of the things that we took away from MPN Horizons last year was there was a strong feeling in the room as we wrapped up on the final day last year that one of the things that we could do as a international network of MPN patient groups was to exploit, to leverage that network to do something international, okay, to reach out to patient communities wherever we found them, and essentially using the network of contacts that we have created through MPN advocates, and to essentially find out what MPN patients need around the world. And what the kind of the underlying sense behind that was that we firmly believe that there is a very, very large community of patients with completely unmet needs today. That either the care that they are being provided with, or the information they're being provided with, or the contact with other patients is far below what they should either expect or that in many cases we are lucky enough to experience ourselves. So, I mean, obviously the end goal for that is to enable that care and that information and that support to be in place for those patients. But as a first step towards that, we think the initiative that we can realistically undertake at this stage is simply to go and find out, well, I say simply because it turns out that it's quite an involved project, but to find out what those unmet needs are, to document them, and to document them in a sufficiently robust and systematic way that we can then present that data in a scientific, in a professional context, that could then be used as a platform for initiating change and to make the lives of those patients with unmet needs better. So that was the kind of idea of this project that Cheryl and I have kind of initiated. So I'll just hand over to Cheryl now, and she'll tell you a little bit about how we've gone about that first initial step. And then what I'd like to do is to invite your thoughts and comments, questions about how we can take that forward. And of course, the underlying thing to this is we want you guys to be involved, not only in terms of actually doing this work for us, but actually getting involved in running it, okay? So that's what I want to be in the back of your minds as we're having this discussion is there a way that I can get involved and be part of this, okay?
Thanks, John. So also one of the things that we looked at was the Landmark survey looked after or dealt with quality of life issues. One of the other issues, unmet needs, but underserved, because we know that there's populations of MPN patients that don't have access to best available therapies. So they're still using the old therapies. And so, you know, the underserved is really an unmet needs is one of the things that we really, really want to look at. So we came up with a set of questions. And just so you know, the background where I kind of jumped in on this was I just recently completed my MBA, and I did, for my thesis, I did a survey, and it was for nonprofits and a particular type of change management tool to be used for nonprofit organizations. So when this idea came up, it was fresh in my mind of doing a survey, and that's why I just jumped in and said, yes, I would love to do this, because I think it's just such a great way to get the data that we need. So we put together a list of questions. We've had them vetted by several people, and then what we did is at the Canadian MPN patient conference in September, we actually had those patients take the survey and give us feedback on the questions. So really it was in the hands of patients and some caregivers that were at our conference in Canada in Toronto, September 23rd. And we asked them, what do you think? Answer the questions for us. Tell us if these questions make sense. Tell us if they don't make sense. Let me know what they mean to you. And so we did get that feedback. So now we're just looking through those surveys to see what the feedback is and was from our Canadian patients. And then what we'll do is once we've vetted, all their comments, then we'll be able to then roll it out to the global MPN advocates community, largely to you folks. And what we're looking for is for you then to take it back to your organizations and your patients and say, you need to do this. And then we can start getting that data. We can start collecting that information. And then, as John said, we will have an advisory team, a medical advisory committee that will look at and validate, because it's very important if we're going to present this to the medical community, because really medicine is all about the numbers. We get it, evidence-based, but it's also about how patients feel. And so, if they are feeling that they have an unmet need and they're underserved, then we have to connect those dots. We have to connect that information so that the physician and medical community has an understanding, a good understanding of where they perhaps are not reaching the maximum potential of their community in having an underserved and unmet needs area. So, our medical advisory team, we haven't made those final decisions on who that will be. We have some recommendations. But, once we get that in place, we'll get it rolled out to you folks who can get it rolled out to your people, to your patients. And then we'll do it electronically. And so that the data capture is much easier and that we can analyze it much easier. And then once from there, then we'll be on our way to writing that paper. And then it will be from the global MPN patient advocacy community. And I think that will say a lot to the medical community. And perhaps we'll have it presented either at ESMO or ASH or wherever we could get it presented. Because I think it's really important for us to be recognized as that legitimate partner. And I think that's how we'll do that.
Yeah, so what we didn't say explicitly, or I didn't say explicitly at the beginning, is that the ambition for this is that the data is gathered and recorded and analyzed in a sufficiently robust way that we will then be able to write a paper which will stand up to the scrutiny that these papers are subjected to, that we are able then to present it to a professional meeting and have it published in a professional journal. So that's our stretch target, if you like, for this. And we believe it's achievable, but we know there's a number of things that we need to go through in order to make that happen. Now, the number one challenge that I thought of initially about that was language. So I'm fairly confident that we could roll out more or less what we've got at the moment to English-speaking communities. But then the challenge is, what about communities where English is not the first language? And when you translate those questions that we've spent some time and care wording in a very, very careful way, when that's translated, can we translate that in a sufficiently accurate and sort of validated way, such that the data that comes back from those questions can realistically be compared with data that comes back from the English questions? So if we want to compare, let's say, what is the experience of living with an MPN in Romania with that of the United States, and that would be an amazing comparison. I think you'll agree. We would expect there to be some large differences that we could prove and to demonstrate, but will that data, that patient-recorded data, be sufficiently accurately and in a valid way recorded such that that is a genuinely factual finding of a difference between two communities? So we have this challenge of language that we need to somehow get over. And so one of the things that we need in terms of a professional input to this process is experience of doing that. Is it realistic? Is it possible? We believe it is, But if it is, how do you do it? How do you get that sort of validation that it will enable you to create a data set that can genuinely be compared across communities? Because that's the real aim. I mean, showing that Romanian people are not happy with their care generally will be fine, but if we can genuinely show that there is a massive disparity, say, between Romania and Poland, you know, that will be a more eye-catching and a more important, I would suggest, conclusion to draw from this type of work. And that's one of the challenges. That's not the only challenge by any means, but that's one of the challenges that occurred to me. So we need to take this seriously at the very first steps. Before we sort of make this available to lots of countries, we need to think about, when we get the data back, will it be valid, that we can do some proper analysis on it. So that's one of the things that we need to do in this sort of first phase of the project.
And I was just going to say, you know, one of the things that we're looking for, and to be able to go to the medical community and say is, okay, people have told us there aren't any MPN doctors in country X. You folks now need to get your stuff together and get an MPN specialist in country X, because people are not being treated or not having the resources or the specialists in that country to be able, now they're having to go out of country. And, you know, like the lady spoke about Africa, you know, that there's only one MPN doctor in that country. And that's not right. The medical community needs to get their stuff together to be able to have more than one MPN physician in a country. We need to have better access to physicians, to treatment, to pharmaceuticals for our patients across the world. And that's where the underserved and the unmet need comes in. And so I think that if we can present this to the medical community, they will be able to use this data as well in their own realm, and perhaps the likes of Claire, the likes of Ruben Mesa, the likes of you know, other MPN specialists across the world will see that and be able then to expand their network. So I think it'll be a dual purpose, and I think they will really find our findings to be very interesting and serving on their side of.
So have you all got an idea of what we're trying to do? Yes. So what do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your questions about?
But as someone who has led a global survey of adherence of more than 2,500 participants in 63 countries, I do have a bit of experience. So I think so I need, first of all, when you take into consideration, I'm not talking now about logistics, I'm not talking about fundraising, all these things will have to be taken separately. You have to be realistic, and the two challenges are, first of all, how to recruit the participants and the languages. And from my experience, it won't be possible. You're talking about getting the perspective of the patient, MPN patient in Romania. It will not be possible to recruit patients from Romania, even if you translate the survey to Romanian language, because you will need the recruitment done by the local MPN patient organization. And if there is no MPN patient organization in the country, none of the patients will reach out to the survey and they will not answer. So maybe you can get 5 or 10 maximum that by accident or by doctor got there, but you need at least 50 people from each country to make the results statistically valid. Yes. That's a number of... By professional statistical agencies, yes. That's plus minus the number that you need and answers from a specific population, a country. So this will also affect the cost, because you will translate it only to languages where we know that there is a local patient organization that can recruit. So, for example, in Belgium, we know that there is a patient organization. It makes sense to translate it to the Belgian language because a local patient organization will be probably capable of recruiting at least 50 patients, if not more, and that goes for the other patient. We have today in the network somewhere between 35 patient organizations in different countries, so that's probably the maximum that we can aim. And countries which still we don't have in the network are not worth to spend money and translate to languages. So that's one thing. Your question about can we translate from English to another language, the answer is certainly yes. You can translate any questionnaire from any meaning, even if it's medically very, very sensitive or you use English words, it can be translated. And usually when you have to contract an agency or somebody who will do the translation, the way we do it in our network, in the CML Advocate, is that we have a professional, somebody who has a background in medical translation, translate the questionnaire. We give it to the local patient organization to check it from their perspective, to check the translation in their language, and they give it to a local medical doctor in their country that will go over the questionnaire and make sure that the words are fit and suitable to the local medical terms used in that country. So that's the process, and we never had any issue with the translation or fitting the medical terms to any language. And then you go to how many languages? We did our survey with 12 languages at the beginning for the adherence survey. We have 63 countries, but Australia, UK, United States, they all speak English. But what happened, we translated 12 languages, but because we have very active members and members from many other countries that wanted to take part. So, for example, the group in Thailand, they went and translated the survey to Thai language. They had a doctor check it, and then they recruited patients. The groups in Slovenia, the group in Arab countries, in Morocco and Lebanon, they did translation on their own, and together with the local doctor. So actually, we did 12 languages, but there were at least 20 languages that were done by local patient organization. So this is just some points to think about, some points to take into consideration when you start moving forward.
What do you think? What sort of questions would you say we should be asking? How do we uncover what the unmet needs are? I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm in favour of it. I would support it for Australia, for sure, and I'll push it. The question that I have is, are there certain outcomes that we are expecting? Because I know that there are probably things that are not working well, but that are completely out of our control through government, rules or legislation. And I would be very careful that we're not actually promising anything that we have no control over. That's my only thing.
I don't think we'd be looking at policy, healthcare policy in any country, because that is so, it's so different in every country and every part of the world. So healthcare policy wouldn't be something that I would be looking for or to search for or to get information on. For me, I'm thinking that the underserved and unmet need is access to best available therapies.
Well, okay, but that's a pointing question, isn't it?
Well,
I mean, you asked that question in the UK. You asked that question in the UK, and it's a political question. It is a policy question. The reason that UK patients, the only UK patients that can access ruxolitinib are medium high-risk myelofibrosis patients. There is no way that a polycythemia vera patient in the UK will be able to take ruxolitinib unless they buy it themselves for God knows how much that costs. There's another mic.
And that's exactly the same also for pegylated interferon in Australia. Within our team, there's one lady that's been pushing Roche and government for 4 years. Now, it's before the board to decide, but if they say no, there's really no... There's no promises that we can't...
Right. And so your point is extremely well made, Yolanda, that we mustn't allow people to infer that by asking the question, we're starting the pathway towards giving access or enabling access for a particular drug, for instance. So that's an extremely good point, and we need to be quite careful the way we position the survey and explain it and everything, that we're gathering data in order to try and influence or something like that. But
yeah, and when I was talking about, we wouldn't be changing policy. I'm not saying that our survey would get to that point of where we would say to government, here, we want you to change policy. What we can do is recommend. We can say that from the survey that we did, 85% of Australians don't have access to the best available therapy that is part of the MPN guidelines of MPN specialists across the world. So then that's up to the medical community then to take it back to their policymakers in Australia, saying 85% of the patients in Australia don't have access to the best available therapy as compared to folks in Canada, US, UK, wherever, that we do that comparative. So that's for them to take that to policy. I'm not suggesting that we delve into that policy where we can make recommendation and where we can show evidence that their policy needs to change. That would be where we're...
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, Cheryl. I just have got a little bit of experience that when you ask people for opinions, they think you're going to provide them with a solution.
good point.
And so it's all about how we phrase it and make it clear that, you know, we're doing this because we want to know and want to see if we can improve. However, this doesn't mean that we are able to actually make that change. So I agree that this data should be made available because there is so little information available on the MPN level. So I would totally encourage to be part of it.
Well, we need to be careful the way we explain what we're doing, and the limitations, let's be clear, the limitations of what we're doing as well as the potential power that it has. Great point, really good point. Anybody else? Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Bahija Guimi from Morocco.
Hello.
Maybe you will remember me. I danced last night. Thank you, Giora. I think MPN Advocate Network, you have now a good model, CML Advocate Network. When we started, we are unique. We didn't have any experience, and then we worked hard to be what CML Advocate is now. I think you should have the key information in this meeting is networking. You should have the key person in each country, and then they will learn and they will speak English if they want. I remember myself when I attended for the first time in 2008, I was unable to speak in English, but if you want, you can. And then I was the only person from Africa attending, like this year in MPN. But now we have more than 20 attendees from Africa for the Arabic country. And maybe I can help if you want in my country and in Africa and in Arabic world, and I will check if there are some MPN doctors, some MPN patient to have contact. And maybe you should put some criteria. Who will attend? Advocate patient or only patient, or who speaks English or French, or you should maybe put some criteria for those patient and doctor also in those country, because you should have what happened in a country with limited resources in Africa and in the other side of the world. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you
I'm
very
very
much.
happy to be with you.
And we'd be very, very grateful to have your assistance with the project. All right. Any other questions or suggestions? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Ibe from Hungary, and I'm happy to have this survey.
Fantastic.
In Hungary. My question is about the access to treatment. We will ask patients about access to treatment, but I'm not sure that Hungarian patients know what is the best available
What best
treatment,
available treatment actually is.
and if we ask them, do you think that you have the best available? Yes, maybe. So it's a tricky. Yes, it's a tricky question.
I mean,
I don't know what is the solution.
We
but-
could say, have you heard of these drugs? The problem there is, to Yolanda's point, you're almost sort of saying, you know, there's some great drugs out there, go and try and find them, which isn't really what we want to happen. We want to gather data about access and availability, but it's a very good point.
So
It
it's
did
just
occur
a
to me when
remark.
you were phrasing that question, but Elsa.
I think you should ask the patient what available is in their country and what
So
they're
what drugs-
having
what
access
drugs?
to, if they know what drugs there are in their country and if they are available.
Okay. What do you think, Giora? I can see you shaking your head to that.
No, when you want to know what the treatments, you ask the question, which treatment are you on now?
Yeah.
And you put the names of available treatments. If there are 5 or 6, you put the name of all available treatments for the specific for the different MPN. You ask also which treatment were you before, because maybe the patient has changed treatment. And so you don't ask what do you think is the best available. This is something very for patients subjective, and usually you don't do it in a survey. You just ask fact: what are you on now? What treatment were you in the past? And then you know that which treatments are being used in that country. Because if, for example, Jakavi is none of the patient who is answering that is a Jakavi, you can assume that Jakavi is not available, no access, and that can be checked with the local patient organization. And then there was one more point I wanted to make. Your survey, you did the survey, how many patients answered?
There were 52.
So it's a nice
Yeah.
size. And I think that before thinking of moving to the next step is analyzing the results of the survey. Because
absolutely.
doing a professional analysis, take a professional statistician that will analyze, and then you can see, are those results something that we expected to receive, or are those results that we want to receive from the final survey? And then you can do adjustment for the questions, add questions, delete questions, and go from there.
I'm not sure that there's a result that we want to achieve. I don't think there's an analysis that we're looking for. What we want to find out what the situation is, and particularly we want to find differences between different communities. But there's no specific sort of thing that we want to prove by doing this survey at this point. I don't have that point of view. Maybe when we look at the Canadian data, there may be a particular point that is so clearly an issue that we need to sort of focus on that in some way. But at this point, I don't personally have a view that we're trying to sort of demonstrate a specific issue to the medical community. Maybe some people do have that view, in which case I'd like to hear it. But at this point, that's the way I'm seeing it.
But the point is that you set the questions according to what you expect to receive. So if you want to check access, you'll ask questions about what treatments.
Fine.
If you want to ask about quality of life, you will put questions about quality of life.
Correct.
If you will want to ask questions,
Understood.
are the patients, are they exposed, or do they have psychosocial support in the treatment? You will put questions about that.
And by the way, we ask all of those questions.
Yeah, so it's not that we're looking for results, but there is
Fine.
an analysis.
So areas
will-
of focus
yeah.
of the questions. Understood, yeah. Very good point. But
Lindsay?
just to be clear, the idea is that we pretty much cover more or less all of those things that Giora said. So questions about access to treatment, questions about access to information, to expertise, clinical trials. Was there a question? I think there was a question about clinical trials, but also support in your in your country. Are you enabled to be put in touch with other patients? Questions like that, and then questions about your quality of life. How much does it affect your quality of life? Although on that point, in half a dozen countries now, Landmark has been rolled out, and so there's already been a fairly comprehensive survey in many countries about quality of life through the Landmark study. So we don't really want to have too much overlap with what's gone before, although there are one or two questions about quality of life.
Lindsay?
Lindsay, sorry.
Hi, I'm Lindsay from MPN Research Foundation. One point of clarification, is this a blind survey? Or
It will be anonymous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there
when
won't be-
people, like, for example...
If they want to give their country name, like, so it won't be where they have to give their name, address, telephone number. It will be, if they want to give us their name, they can. If they want to remain anonymous, they can. We would ask what country they're from, and that would be the only standard.
Uh-huh. And is it going to be online or...
Yes.
We're imagining it would be an online survey, yeah. Although I guess we'd probably need to make it available on a paper basis
Pen and
as well.
paper
I'm not
if-
sure.
Well,
Why
it
is
is
that?
complicated. It's better to do it online only because to do the statistical
Certainly make
analysis
things
would be
easier,
much
but what's your
easier.
point, Björn?
So in the adherence survey, we wanted to minimize bias, and we know that internet users may be younger and may be more educated than maybe older patients who don't use the internet. So we in 3 countries, in Germany, French, and Italy, we printed the survey on paper, and we collaborated with a local hematologist, and we gave them 1,000 questionnaire to be distributed in the hospitals during the patient appointments. Right. And we put it in a pre-stamped envelope. Patient took it home, filled it, put it in the post, and it went to the logistic agency for analysis. Right. We received 400 responses from all these 3 countries. But it's a logistical big issue. I mean, it's not easy. You need to get to the doctors, the envelopes, and everything.
It's not a question of the validity of the responses.
No.
It's just that it
The
costs money and takes time.
I just have a question for Dave. Dave, how did you guys do Landmark? Was it all by...
So it was internet, but to the point you guys are talking about, we recognized that there was a bias because 80% of the respondents were college degree or higher, income above $80,000, as well as mostly females. So we did try to, beyond using email lists and advocacy organizations, we did send copies of the survey to physicians to hand to their patients. It just, we didn't get a lot of response. We did get some. It did help resolve some of that bias.
I know in Canada, just our time is up, but I just can say in Canada, the physician-led Landmark didn't give the results that they wanted. It was only through the patient group that we got the needed results by sending the email, the blanket email out saying, if you want to participate, send me your email address, and then we forwarded that on to the organizing company that.
So
that
just
did
to
that.
follow on that point, though, unless you gather some basic demographic information from each participant, you're never going to know what your bias is.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so we just have two more. There's this lady and Werner. But we're just about
I'm
out of
from
time.
Chile, and maybe it's a good idea to put with physicians or where they are available, because sometimes, for example, for me in Chile, it's difficult to find some physician that can help me. And we need them for meetings, for example, with the patients. So if you know where is the physician, maybe which hospital, we can be easy, or for patients from another country, maybe from next for us. And if we can make maybe some, like a CML day, that is great. I think with MPNs, it can be the same. In Chile, it was perfect. We visit the physician in the hospital, and you create something special between the patients and with all the, how you say, we can maybe, it's a good idea.
We're being told that we need to move on.
Okay. But we can, as microphone. The MPN, the Netherlands can help out spreading the form. We have a magazine, 1,200 members, 3 times a year. So that's first step, perhaps. Yeah. Okay.
You've now been recorded saying...
Yeah, okay. I know. I hope the board is excited also.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your